And Pascal?
I think it works. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Xenia, for introducing me, and Xenia and Valeria also to invite me here. I'm very happy to come to talk about the work of Jana. But I will not only do that. So I in a way, I took the work. Let's say I took the work in my own work, and I also changed my work in relation to her work. So that's a little bit the building up of what I do. But the question was to talk about the politics of form or the politics of aesthetics, and it is in fact a subject in which I'm busy. I think now really politics already a long time, but the relationship with aesthetics, I think the last 5-7 years. And it's for me really trying to rediscover what is the social value of aesthetics or aesthesis. But I'm working also on ambiguity, and a last book of mine, but it's still only in Dutch. It will be translated next year in English, is the topic of trust. And I think trust is very much related to aesthetics. To find trust, you need aesthetics, but I come to this later in a minute, what I mean by that. First of all, forgot. Thank you for being here. So many people, it's always impressive. Okay, I try now to do this. Yeah, it works. Okay, so the question was, what is the relationship? Their question was, what is the relationship between politics and aesthetics, or is there such a thing like politics of form? I relate this to the politics I'm used to. Let's say I'm from Belgium, Western Europe. We are familiar with democracy, so I will not dive into the typical use of aesthetics in dictatorship, Nazi regime, etc., because I think you all know how propaganda works, how aesthetics was used in such a kind of of violent systems, but also I think in the way the communist system had the same as a kind of relationship between, let's call it, dictatorship and aesthetics. I will do something else. I will look at how a kind of democracies also influence aesthetics and have their own aesthetics, and promote also their own aesthetics. And I will only jump in, let's say, the last 20-30 years of in the discussion about democracy. It's more a political, philosophical democracy. So I don't will go back to Mesopotamia, where somewhere democracy started. I will also not go to the old Greek times. I will really look at the debates of modern democracy and the recent debates of, let's say, the last 20 years. And roughly saying, there is a kind of differentiation between three kinds of democracies. One is the well-known, when I ask my students, what is democracy, or what do you imagine when you say the word democracy, they say parliament, voting. So this is a typical kind of democracy you all know. It's representative democracy, is it called, sometimes also liberal representative democracy. It's all about voting, it's about quantities, who has the most amount of votes is elected and is in power, in principle, in theory, in this system. So it's a calculating rationality, and so the majority is in charge. This is very basically the system. It's Alexis de Tocqueville, for example, Democracy in America, who has written about this kind of democracies. Second democracy. Before I go in the next slide to aesthetics and the relationship between those democracies. Deliberative democracy. Deliberative democracy is more about that. People who are discussing with each other to find a consensus. This is a discussion in Antwerp, the city where I live, about the civil account. 10% of the budget of the Antwerp government, so of the city government, is free for people. They need to discuss and come out, and they can spend it to what they want, right? But they need to find a consensus. So this is deliberation is very important. Not anymore quantity, but quality, talking, and especially what you say is important. So the quality of the argument is important in a deliberative democracy. So it's about an argued rationality. Often, such a deliberative democracy becomes an expertocracy. It's experts who has the right papers, the right schooling, who can talk, who can argue also very well, are in favor of this, and they search for consensus. The guy who has written a lot about this is Jürgen Habermas, about public space, but also the whole idea of the rationale of communication is very important in his opinion. A third one, and less known, at least in my cultural context, is what I call agonistic democracy. In an agonistic democracy is not talking any more important, but doing and making, participation in the doing. It's what we call in Flanders a do democracy, where people do things. It's not so much based on rational arguments, but on emotions, affects. Think, for example, at Black Lives Matters, but also the early feminist struggles, which are very much based, and I don't mean it in a sentimental sense, I mean on rational affects, rational emotions, which play a very powerful role in it. And what is important in this system is dissensus. So not consensus, but always the possibility that somebody stands up and says, I'm not agree, and I want to break the dissensus. The problem with the deliberative democracy is often that people think, oh, we have a consensus, everybody agrees. But often a lot of people who don't agree are suppressed. And this is exactly where this agonistic democracy comes from. And one of the main voices is Chantal Mouffe, is a political philosopher also. She's Belgian, by the way. She was a long time the wife of Ernesto Laclau, and Laclau was also has written a lot about together with her. So for me, these are the three main democracies we know. You can add 50 other ones. So I make this selection to make it specific. And first of all, but I don't want to go in depth to this, I don't say that one is better than the other. I think we have all three, and the friction between them is very good, I think, for democracy. But I don't go into depth to that. That's another research and another book. I want to relate it now to the typical aesthetics which comes from it. The first one, representative democracy, is very much related, it's very much 19th century related, the building of the nation state, the building of a national canon also to legitimize the nation state, It's a typical liberal bourgeois culture related, so it is very much related to individualism. You can do it on your own idea. The late American dream idea is still in it. The protagonist in this is the idiosyncratic artist, so the artist who is a bohemian, a little bit strange, but the artist is most of the time a self-made man. Sorry for that, but 19th century, and self-made is very important. And this is really an ideal for the bourgeoisie culture, of course, that you can make it on your own as an individual. So in that sense, the artist has a kind of aura because of this kind of selfhoodness. You can make it yourself. The whole idea of building is central to it, so it means that there is one, yes, there is only one good culture with capital C, and we have to learn all the people this culture. That is the whole idea of building. We have to bring them in this kind of bourgeois culture, then it's morally good also. Right? So it's a moral relationship between these aesthetics. That's also why I call this vertical aesthetics. It's really top-down, a bourgeois culture who says this is the main culture we need, and you're only a good one if you share this culture. Our first Minister of Cultures in the 1970s in Belgium had this slogan. He said, the postman needs to listen to Bach. This is the classical thing. This was the way how he legitimized his policy of culture. So you have to raise the people, bring them in high culture. But it stays until now, and when you look at the whole idea of liberal arts, until today you can read this in several policy recommendations, for example, legitimizations also, but also some philosophers are really proposing that. I think when you look at aesthetics, this is the end point of this kind of bourgeois aesthetics, as Jackson Pollock. But what is in here, I think, somebody on a very idiosyncratic level expresses himself in an abstract way. So for me, this is let's say almost the end point, or the accumulation of this kind of bourgeois culture, which really puts the individual in front, and you get something abstract, but it seems to be the inner expression of an individual still in this work. Second, deliberative democracy. You see fights to this kind of bourgeois culture by cultures. We try to respect folk culture, but also other cultures. So it's the promotion also of multicultural society in it. And the protagonist in this whole system is not anymore the individual artist, but the mediator, the curator comes in front of. He can talk, or she can talk, argue why this idea is good for this exhibition. So it's much more about talking again, arguing, sharing ideas. And this culture has also its own social class. It's not anymore the bourgeoisie, but it is in fact the middle class. Often the white middle class, who is mostly also still male, men, who promote very much this kind of deliberative culture and also do it in aesthetics. This starts, let's say, in the 70s, 1970s, 1980s, but shifts in the 1980s to the 90s, where this kind of whole aesthetics becomes a kind of liberal, neoliberal vision, in which very much the creative entrepreneur, the artist needs to be a creative entrepreneur, is cultivated. But I call it not anymore vertical aesthetics, I call it horizontal aesthetics, because the whole selection mechanisms work differently in this system than in a representative democracy. In the representative democracy, for example, a director of an art museum chooses work because it needs to be represented. I interviewed once several museum directors in Flanders, and I just asked him, why did you select a work? And it was something about pop art, and the director just said, because we not had yet pop art in our museum, so I had to buy something what is pop art. Representative democracy, as representation of a certain style is in it. And very important also, pop art or whatever, there is a kind of art historical chronological logic in it. So it means literally you look to the past and you see art history as accumulative, building up each other. So every ism follows the next ism, but very important is you look to history. That's typical, the modern project. You look to history to look at or to find out what is new. This is this is already different than deliberative democracy. There you get kind of not vertical aesthetics, more looking in history, looking in what is underground, what we have here, and what can we show up. But horizontal aesthetics, what I mean by that, here you imagine a huge group globally operating curators. What are they doing? They are looking to each other. What is he doing? What is she doing? What can I do? What is different? So it's literally looking at the here and now, what is happening at other places, and mirroring often, but at the same time trying to distinct yourself of it. This is a kind of horizontal aesthetics. That does not mean that those curators don't make historical exhibitions anymore, but they only make an historical exhibition when it distincts themselves to other curators and other exhibitions which are going on now. This is the hyper-contemporary art. It's really living only in the contemporary. So it has no history anymore, and there's also no future anymore. It's looking at the here and now to distinct. And I took here a work of in relational aesthetics of Thibaut, where you see this kind of other kind of aesthetic. So you see artists who try to open the museum in a way, talk with the public who comes there, and organize in a horizontal way talks. Very important, again, deliberative, speaking with people, socializing with people, etc. Again, this is a typical middle-class social setting, and I think also a typical middle-class art. What is the outcome of it, and aesthetics. Then I go to agonistic democracy, which is much more related to subaltern cultures, protest cultures, also politics brings it in. I think when you, in a way, if you were at, or had the possibility anyway, to be at last Documenta 15, you see a lot of this kind of art. So a lot of protest cultures, activists, sometimes you don't know anymore, are activists or artists, or it's some mixture of it, something in between. But what is important is here not anymore, I call the aesthetics not anymore horizontal or not anymore vertical, but aesthesis. And by aesthesis I mean literally it is about feeling. Feeling with the senses, so all the senses become important, not only anymore looking, but I come later to that also. Not only anymore listening, but all the senses, touch, smell, being in the context at the place, very important to make your art. And maybe it sounds a little bit blunt, but I think this work fits very well in it. And why? When you look at it and you take a little bit of abstraction of the work, there's not much difference between those two in the aesthetics, how it looks like. But, of course, if you know this is Jackson Pollock quite drunk when he's doing this, trying to express himself in it and his own, busy with his own psychological system, you know this is something else. This is somebody who represents a collective thing. Of course, it's still an individual artist, but she's representing, let's call the scars, the pain of a people. So this is something else. And in that sense, it's much more related to this kind of aesthesis. It's really also about touching, but also having a collective touch in a sensitive way. Also, even when you can touch it, I don't know if you can touch it, but anyway, the material is really literally also like that. So it's a completely different experience than this Jackson Pollock. You definitely cannot touch. Don't touch this painting. Here you can touch it even if you want, but because of the material also and the materiality of it. So when I relate democracies to aesthetics, I think this is really the outcome of this kind of agonistic democracies in which emotions become important again, but also all the senses are important in it. Okay, now I jump to, if I can, yes I can. I jump to a topic I thought I have to discuss this with you, with a big question mark, because I'm still doing research on this. I'm starting also, I hope we can start it. We are making an application for Horizon. It's a European grant system, together with one of the partners is the Cardiff School of Architecture. And the whole call is about how can you, it's not totally about it, but it's one word in it, how can you decolonize culture? Because it's also, and I come back to that, it's also very much related to aesthetics, in a sense. So that's why I jumped to this, because I'm curious for you. I'm really curious to hear you about those ideas. I don't say I have the right thing in mind at this moment. It's still, for me, a research quest in which I want to dive with you. But I thought it was important to think about it. I'm already a long time busy with identity politics, and this has to do with my own background. I live in Belgium. Belgium, you have a French part, you have a Dutch-speaking part. There's always a huge fight. Still now, the biggest political party, nationalist Flemish political party, wants to divide the country. And they still have this kind of decolonizing rhetorics. We have to get rid of the French guys who always, in history at least, played the boss. Let's say it's simple like that. So it's also something what is very much related to here, but when I came back in February to Ukraine to make a film and also to interview a lot of people, this came always back. So I recognize this kind of discourse of decolonization. How can we decolonize from the enemy, question mark, and is it possible at all when it's so deep in your culture? So it's very much, the whole discussion of colonization, decolonization, is very much related to identity politics. It's about what is your identity, what is my identity. Okay, first of all, what is identity politics, or why is it so strong? I think it's, for me, a very interesting thing, and it's very much related to culture. Because identity is, in fact, the way of giving meaning to yourself and the way to give meaning to your society. This is, in fact, culture. Giving meaning to something. This is what you learn in culture. Giving meaning to your own life. It's like Heidegger once answered, why do you have culture? He answered this with, in German, of course, Sein zum Tode. Because we know we are going to die, we ask the question, what I'm doing here, and then culture starts. And you make sense of your life, or try to make sense of your life. So it's very much related to identity questions, this culture production of making meaning, of making sense of it. And that's also the power in it, I think. People want to, for example, emancipate. They want to have their own identity. They want to be recognized as having an own identity in such a process. And even if this identity politics is very much discussed, for example, feminism is also identity politics. It's very much discussed by, let's say it in a way, the old school Marxist tradition. They say it's not about identity, it's about social class. The last one who's still alive is Slavoj Žižek, who's still saying this. He says, against identity politics, no, the identity politics is only the surface. What is under it is social class, and inequality is the main thing. But even when you go back to Marx, you see that also for Marx, in a way, what he says, identity is very important, because he says a social class can only emancipate it when it becomes a social class, Klasse an sich to a Klasse für sich. So this means, literally, that the social class becomes conscious of its own identity, that it has a kind of same identity. That's a Klasse für sich. So even in this kind of old Marxist tradition, identity plays a very important emancipatory role. You have to recognize your own social class, your own identity as a woman or as a black African person to emancipate. The first thing is giving meaning to yourself in that sense, recognizing yourself as a social class, for example, labor class, to get an action. So this meaning is giving is very important. So it gives drive for action, drive for emancipation. And that's why identity politics is so important. And it plays also, I come back to that, I think a very important role in decolonization politics. It's often driven by identity. So identity is a matter of, so now comes the postmodern story. But this is what people like Derrida said, etc. Said, yeah, but identity, that's just difference. It's just you are different of, I'm different of you, and we are different of me. So it is just this kind of constructivist idea to distinct yourself on that. A lot of also feminist theorists like Butler built further on that. The book Gender Trouble is a typical book in which he said, yeah, gender is in fact a cultural construction. It is, and you can even, in fact, I said no blunt in my ways, even when you are a male, you can be feminine in a way. So it is a kind of cultural construction in this sense. So that's also a kind of deconstruction of the idea of identity. It has no essence. It has no ontology, an identity. It's pure construction in the differentiation with others. And it's also in that way that nation states are constructed. It comes in Anderson's rhetorics. It's an imagined community. It's imagination. I don't say it's fake, it's imagination. And this imagination becomes real. But it is, in fact, in our heads. And in our communications, etc., we set it up. So identity is something strange. It's constructed. It's, in fact, empty. There is no real deep inner in it, so no Jackson Pollock. It's really, there is no deeper inner side in us. It is constructed, and what is inner in us is constructed in a relationship in distinction with others. Same counts for a nation state. We distinct the nation state and build the we build the nation state in distinction to others. And this is quite interesting, and this one of my favorites. I have only one favorite Belgian intellectual, and that's Paul van den Broek. He analyzed how identities were constructed by, he's an art historian and also anthropologist, by analyzing the work of Hieronymus Bosch and Bruegel. And he had a strange question. He said, who is buying this in that time? There are farmers, there's somebody shitting there on the earth, and that happens a lot here, somebody laying drunk. Who is buying this? People who are painted in this, they don't have the money to buy this, who are represented in this. So, who is buying this was his question. Well, who is buying this? The bourgeoisie is buying this. It were also quite small paintings, so not for big castles, no, small paintings, quite small, in the housing. So, why are they buying this? Well, to say, I'm not like this. So they buy this to give a kind of negative mirroring of themselves. They project everything what is bad, indecent, awful to the other, to say, I'm not like that. And this is typical mechanism of what Paul van den Broek calls negative self-definition. You define yourself, your own identity, by saying, I'm not like that. I'm not like you. And mostly also degraded. Say, yeah, what you're doing is not so good. I'm better. So there is also this kind of hierarchy building. This mechanism is typical for identity politics. It's literally distincting you from the self, and often also trying to say, often, not always, I'm better, or we are better as a nation state in this negative self-definition. I've seen, when I was here in February it's the Mother Earth Museum, called it like that? Museum here in Kiev? Yeah, okay. Exhibition with propaganda, Russian propaganda. It was literally this. Look like Ukrainian people look like. This is really, it was the same in the very old-fashioned way. They do this. They build this kind of propaganda like that. But it's universal. It happens everywhere. This kind of mechanism. Okay. So long, so good. So you have this kind of whole idea. Identity is constructed, and it is a lot of theoreticians, like again Butler, say so identity is also masculinity, femininity. It's a construction. It's a cultural construction, and we have to relativize this kind of construction. You could build, certainly in the 90s, a lot of intellectual credibility by saying this in the academic world. So being against essentialism, naturalism, fundamentalism, etc. But another feminist, Iris Young, says to in relation to this, it is difficult to articulate positive elements of group affinity without essentializing them. So again, what you see here is you have this intellectual debate about relativism, but at the same time, when you go into politics and real life, it's very difficult to keep this kind of constructivist attitude. And literally, I just give a basic example, discussion we have had the last 3 years in my own university about feminism. At a certain moment we said, yeah, you cannot emancipate without quota, saying 50% or a gender balance needs to be there. So you start to count, literally. But that means also that you cannot count as, yes, this guy is more feminine than that guy. Of course not. You become essentialist, say, you are a woman, okay, your biology is like a woman, so quota. Yeah? 50% is in 50. So you start to essentialize again. And this is typical for identity politics. So it is also no politics possible without this kind of exclusion and inclusion, but inclusion is always also exclusion, and without identification and identity. So integration in such systems, and it's beautiful that a quite neoliberal philosopher comes with that, Fukuyama in his book Identity. In fact, when he talks about integration in this book, he talks about assimilation. Become literally the same as the other, the same values, the same thing. So again, essentializing certain characteristics, etc. Okay, so I think in discussion of decolonization we have a problem here, because you cannot just relativize the others in politics. And I think here is a problem when we talk about decolonization we have to tackle. I go one step further in colonization and identity politics, and I come back to my own place. What is standing there? It's a picture taken in the city of Leuven. It's a student city in where the University of Leuven is, Catholic University of Leuven, and here are Flemish professors and students saying. Wallonian people, so French-talking people, go home. And this is protest because all the professors were French-speaking. All the lawyers were French-speaking in this system. So this was the emancipatory flight of the Flemish people, the Dutch-speaking people, to say, go home, this is our university, and we want to be taught in our own language. So identity politics, which was 1968 quite progressive. It was a really progressive struggle for emancipation of a people. But what happened when you look nowadays, the same guys who are standing there on the street have now in Belgium a very conservative nationalist Flemish party. So at a certain moment, they make the shift from being very progressive, emancipating, to very conservative, orthodox conservative, and they make this whole shift. And this is something what we often see, I think, in history and identity politics. So you see emancipation of the people, trying to decolonize, and then at a certain moment this reflects like our own people first. Trump, America first, this kind of conservative reaction. So you see also always the danger in this, and I push it a little bit, of course, but going from chauvinism to literally genocide, killing people in this, but also even in the identity politics of feminism, going to genocentrism. That means we do clubs only for women. My son was excluded in the political Green Party in Belgium because they want to have international meetings only with women. So this is the kind of, and of course it's a response to too much men, I know, but at a certain moment it becomes the opposite of it, I think. And it's also what Sartre called anti-racist racism. It is literally a racism from, he describes it, from black people against white people. To fight, to win their struggle, of course, but at a certain moment, it becomes literally the same as what they are fighting against, the struggle. So, cultural relativism changes then in essentialism. We can discuss this also. I discuss this a lot with my sons about woke, cancel culture. Is this not the same in the left-wing thing? But it is always about, and this interests me, and this is something what I maybe want to discuss with you. This is always balancing between the liminal zone between emancipation and exclusion. And the question is, where is the balance? Or where is exactly, for me, that's why I call it also the pivotal moment. What is exactly the moment when this shift happens from progressive to conservative, from emancipation to a kind of chauvinism or even nationalism, from emancipation to exclusion. And I think also in discussion about decolonization, from decolonization to amputation. And what the effect is of this, I think, is cannibalization. At a certain moment, you start to amputate in the decolonization process your own identity. Not speaking Russian anymore, for example, while you did it all your life, some of you, and had the most intimate talks in Russia, saying at a certain moment, we don't speak Russian anymore. It is not possible anymore. And refusing your own, of part of your own culture, your own history. So you start to amputate, but my opinion is at that moment you start to cannibalize also your own culture. And the question is, and again, it's a question for me, is this possible? Can you amputate yourself in such a system? Anyway, I think not. But again, open question to you. So again, and this is beautifully represented, I think, exactly in this work of Jana, in which, of course, you all know this figure. Ukraine, where the Crim is cut it out, let's say like that. But what interests me more is the backside of it, and this is this Soviet wallpaper on the other side, in which, in my opinion, she's saying something very important. So it means literally, what is also in our culture, and how can we deal with that? Question again. Question. I don't know, but that's for me, I think, an interesting idea, and it's anyway. And it has also, for me, this represents literally another aesthetics. Is for me the aesthetics of ambiguity. I don't go too deep in that, but it's again Iris Young who says, maybe we have to not think anymore about nation states in building an identity, but in a kind of what she calls urban intimacy. That means that you can live with completely strangers in your own city together without having an identity, but you can live together because you share certain needs. Ambiguity, so it's also something what Iris Young said, so maybe she says it's better to think at common needs and common fragilities. What we share, what kind of needs we share to build up a kind of living together. And that's what she called urban intimacy. So living in the city and not in the nation state anymore. So living together and the possibility of living together without sharing the same identity, but because you shared certain needs. Okay, so the main thing I learned of Iris Young, for example, is that ambiguity is in fact our collective identity. Yeah? So it is exactly this kind of also shared fragilities which makes our identity. And identity coming from identitas means sameness. So what we have the same, what we share, is exactly this ambivalent and this ambiguous identity. And again, I think that that shows Jana very much. So that's my statement, my question. I don't know. It's the whole idea that even your biological body, but also political system, and also a society cannot survive without trust in the alien within ourselves. A strange thing which came in, what is there, and on which we have to deal with, or even we have to trust on. I know this is the one but last slide. I will try to go back to not the aesthetics of politics, which I talked until now, but I go to the politics of form or the politics of aesthetics. And I just look again how artists respond to certain things in social life, in politics, and what kind of aesthetics they develop. First aesthetic is what I call beautiful thinking. It's looking at beautiful things, but also beautiful thinking in the last sense. It's really looking at, there I made a mistake, looking at the landscape, at the distance, looking at nature, making things beautiful. But this is a classical strategy of trying to represent, at least as you do that in aesthetics, then you make a kind of democratic move, trying to represent the unrepresented. This is very much Jacques Rancière, but by showing it more beautiful than it is, or trying to convince that something which is ugly, what is suppressed, what is not said, can be beautiful. This is a typical way of reasoning. And I came to this not only, I came to this later on by not reading, because I don't read Ukraine, but it's a novel. I interviewed Sacha Bol, you know him? It's a singer-songwriter, but he has also written this novel, Ivy, I have to say in English. And I talked with him a lot about the utopic or dystopic end of the novel, because in this he describes something like this. I've chosen this picture because it's not in the novel, but he describes something like this. He said at the end, it's the end of war, there are only this kind of ruins, and there is this Ivy, I think, or Ivy, Ivy, is it? Ivy, grown everywhere. And this is, he said it in the interview, this is really, this is paradise. Finally, nature is there again. It's winning again from people. So it's very good for climate struggle, etc. But there's lacking something in this picture, and also in his description. Humanity itself. People are disappeared completely. So he has an idea of a paradise which is without people, without man or woman involved. But it is for me this is beautiful thinking. It is really kind of trying to rephrase an opportunity to set in. For me, this is literally a politics of form. This is literally a kind of political thinking in the form. And here it's a novel, it's not a visual outward, of course. Second, I think this is a work of, probably you also know, Gamlet. It's an artist who's working in Kharkiv. What he is doing at this moment, at least during the war, is literally working at the spot, in the context, sometimes almost in the front line, making his work. So it's what I call situational in situ art, with the ugly word. It's in situ, it's at the space, and he responds with his work on the situation. Quite literally sometimes, in this picture, figurative in it. And he's not anymore showing something beautiful and looking at the landscape, he's really going into the landscape. So there's another way of dealing with art. I think, again, a lot of artists who were on Documenta 15 are doing this also, in totally other contexts, etc. So it's really working on the local level, on the spot, having very much a sense of nearness, being there. So the sensitive becomes, again, very important in this kind of aesthetics. And it starts from local energies, frictions which are going on, and try to catch them. So this is another kind of aesthetics. And the last one, kind of strategy, is, and I relate it very much, sorry again for the bad quality of the picture, to the work of Janna. It's what I call, I had no better word of it, depth aesthetics. And it is really trying to go not into the landscape, but under the landscape. It's really literally looking back, what is our history? What were our ancestors? What were they doing? And so this is trying to find again a sense of fragility and even transience. So literally looking at the dead in our own society. And this kind of thing, what artists are trying to do, is for me something very important, because it is in fact, at least in Western Europe, where I come from, it's something we suppressed enormously. And what do we suppress? It's our own culture. It's our own culture of the death. We really suppress that in our own society. We don't even have the rituals anymore to remember them, or we suppress them also. We even suppress the elderly to homes in other countries that we don't have to take care anymore for them. So this kind of relationship of building up again something with what, that's why I call depth aesthetics, with deep history and ancestors. It's, I think, another kind of politics of form which try to deal with us ourselves. Anyway, let's end here. That's my last slide. So everything, it comes from philosopher George Agamben. He says every political community is built on a sensory foundation. And I would even add to that, every political community is built on an aesthetic foundation. What I mean by this is literally, again, aesthetics as all the senses, so not only sensory, but also the effects which are related to that. And I think this is literally the connection between politics and aesthetics. It is literally, politics cannot without aesthetics, again as seen as aesthesis, as the whole senses on which you stand related to effects. And this is really the thing which builds or which grounds a community. and not so much, also of course, but not so much culture in meaning giving, but culture really as feeling, being in touch with all the senses, being embedded also in the soul is a very important, at least feeling for building a political community. I don't say it's good or bad, that's something else, but it's needed to have a kind of political community, this kind of sensory feeling and attachment. Voila, that's it. Thank you, and if you have questions.
I wanted to ask one question. Why did you compare changing your native language with cannibalism? Sorry? You compared changing a native language with cannibalism. What's common between these two situations? Cannibalism describes the situation when one person eats another one of the same kind. And what's common with the...
No, I went too quick to that. But what I wanted to say is it's not only language, it's really culture in the broadest sense. So we did it also I take literally the Belgian example. Flemish people use a lot of French words in the talking. And at a certain moment they started to abolish this. They try to find alternative words, often English words, to replace it, etc. But by doing this, they also literally cannibalize their own culture. They eaten themselves from the inside out. That's what I mean by that. And so they had a certain kind of traditions, expressions, things they used, but by trying to abolish it, to put it out, they in fact put it out also part of themselves. And that's what I call cannibalism. It's literally, eating your own kind because you think it's the other. And this is also a typical. I didn't went because my PowerPoint blocked, but it's one who psychoanalyst who has written a lot about this is Kristeva, about abolishing the other and the abject. It's exactly the strange in ourselves. We how do you say it? We see it now with Palestine again, to give a kind of blunt example. If you see that there is something from the other which you hate or whatever, are in confrontation in yourself, you are even more pushing it out and responding even more harder. But by doing this, at the end, I think you destroy yourself.
Well, in our case, it would better sound like surgery, not cannibalism.
Ah, surgery, yeah, but this is amputation I used. Yeah, but it is literally eating your own part of your own self. Yeah, but anyway.
Well, it starts killing. I mean, they came to kill us because we spoke Russian. So it's it's the question of our survival.
Yeah, sure, sure, yeah. But again, it's for me the open question.
Do you think it's possible to replace the missing part with something else, like on the spot, like almost immediately?
That's my question. I don't know. Can you replace it? Can you? How do you call it in English? A fake leg. Yeah, just to say it literally. Yeah. No, but really, can you an artificial?
It generates like Russian songs disappeared on our radio, and thousands of nice, very good Ukrainian songs appeared. And they sound much better.
Yeah.
The same with.
Yeah.
We have our symbolic microphone there.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, because in the back they don't hear you probably. Yeah, but this is indeed it is a possibility. Again, it's a question. It's really a question about how do you deal with a history which is really embedded, I think, in your own body, and how can you replace it? Again, it's an open question for me. It's really, or will you not cannibalize yourself? But that, again, by doing that.
Yeah, I was wondering. So, if Belgium is a couple steps ahead of us in terms of reflecting on cannibalism. So what helped you to reflect on this topic, and how did it happen inside the culture?
In which culture?
In Belgium. What was the process on reflecting on this cannibalism? What naturally at first you start to disassociate from it, but then somehow you think about it and think something different. And now you can say that, oh, maybe we shouldn't replace it with English words. So what exactly was happening?
Yeah, it's still happening. Yeah? So what you see now is the story about the bad French who were literally for a long time dominating the Flemish. That's not a lie. But at this moment, it's the opposite. We are more rich than the French part, and we are playing the boss. But politicians of nationalist parties, the biggest by the way, still play this game of saying, yeah, they take much more money of our state than a little up, all these discussions. But this is what is interesting is, I think, because a lot of people don't believe this rhetorics anymore. Right? They say, French people are not a problem anymore of our society. But then you see in this mechanism, especially extreme right political party, 20-50% of the votes in Flanders. So 25% of the people vote to them. They find again another, how do you say it, another scapegoat. And in their own, even in their own political party, which remembers me at Stalinism also, who did this also. So everybody is suspicious at a certain moment to bring this other again and again and again in it. And this is what is happening now. It's really kind of, a paranoia state. At least paranoia is diffused everywhere. And that's what I mean by, So they find always another other, even when it's so close to you, even if it looks like you. And that's I think the mechanism, or the dangers, again, the dangers of an extreme, what happens in this. And again, for me, it's much more interesting, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. For me, it's interesting exactly this liminal zone, this moment when it shifts from one to the other, and I'm literally looking there. Maybe this is the ambivalent or ambiguity moment which we need to stay in. That's a little bit my theory. And it's just theory or speculation.
You remind me by your words like how it's going on actually, how in general level it's going on, and how in the personal level and personality is going on. So if you remember from psychology that a Karpman triangle, when it's aggressor, victim, and safer, I think, looks like in the general level it's going on the same. So like when you're on that line of like not only discussion but reality, you change all the time that position. And I think we have that situation now. But the question is, what we can do if war is still going on. So we can reflect after, we could, and the question is that our opponent, it's opponent who never says that evil is evil, who never answer for all 20th century for nothing. And it's not only who is better or who is like forever, it's a question not only about identity, but our life, like how we actually should be with any senses at all. And I'm interested in like also like question by question, how it could be, how it should work when we stay still in that time. So like can we change our senses not to be like in revenge, for example, to Russia, but most of people want revenge. And like how we should change that senses at all, like jump out of that like victim aggression and all of that things. Role.
Because you didn't ask several questions, but in several, how do you say it, conditions or contexts. You said first, what to do now when we are in war. I had a huge fight with Belgian journalists because I said in the Belgian newspaper, you need to deliver weapons. Punt. It's done. When you are in war, you need to defend yourself and you need to shoot. It's the only thing you can do. So forget pacifism. It's really, it's a stupid thing in a war condition to say this. I had huge fights, still now. People are blaming me that I made this, I took this position. So again, this is all beautiful theory when you are in war. It's all nice looking, but it is really, indeed I think it is maybe something, and again, maybe something to think about, and again, it's also what I try to do with Cardiff School of Architecture, is literally thinking at, let's take it on this level. What are our buildings? Which buildings do we want to save? Let's say it on a material level. What is Ukraine architecture and why? And why would we need to save exactly this and not another? Again, open questions, but this questioning for everything is important. What is our language? What is not our language? What is our culture? What is not our culture? What are our symbols? We incorporated for a long time, and maybe they are not ours, but maybe they became part of ours. And this is the question. But again, in wartime, it's wartime, and really you have to defend yourself as hard as you can. I'm not saying that now you have to embrace the other, and this is a stupid thing. This is impossible at this moment, and I don't know what can happen afterwards. It's really yeah. And I make, just because you remember, and maybe I make a whole mistake in my reasoning, because you said also what I put something of the psychological or individual level on the collective level. Maybe this is a bridge too far. Maybe it is. This works.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you. Because when I first came to this exhibition, I couldn't perceive the exhibits, the works by Жанна as pieces of art, because I saw too much of such things in real life. So I didn't understand how these actually fragments, they were for me like photos on my phone. But you explained why it is art and why it is important. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but I have to say I don't care anymore if something is art or not. I really no, but I don't make this qualification anymore.
They are in the art.
They are here. Yeah. So they are. Yeah. Sure. So somebody thought it was art in it. Yeah.
I want to ask about what is about the French. How do they behave? How do they decolonize themselves? And do they? It's a question to many former emperors, or what do you call it? UK has done a good job. You can see it in Hong Kong. They don't really want to be a part of China. However, UK still has Egyptian stuff in their museums for some reason. So, what do you think? How French should behave? Do you feel like you are still like a former colony or something?
The French. I would say something stupid. The French don't behave. I mean, but by that they have different behaviors. So our responses to that. So one part says, but it's really about dividing Belgium or not. That's the discussion. Giving autonomous regions. Some say no, we want to stay by Belgium. Majority of the French-talking people, they say we are one nation state. We are together. So we want to stay together. But what interests me more, it's now started because next year there are elections in Belgium, but also on the European level. For the first time, and I come back to cannibalism then also. For the first time, the Flemish nationalist political party has lists in the French part. So as a French-speaking Wallonian, you can vote on the nationalist Flemish party. And now I continue. We have a lot of second, third generation immigrants in Belgium. So Italian people, but also Maghreb people, Turkish people, who vote on extreme right because they don't want that Syrian people come in Belgium. That's what I call cannibalism, you know? They vote, in fact, against themselves in the system. And that's a kind of very strange response, what is happening now in this kind of logic. And again, these are the extremes. But the French people, at least in general, say, no, we don't want to divorce. We want to have our own nation state. And there is a very small extreme right-wing party at French side, but it had even not 1% of the votes who are also for dividing the country. But so there are a lot of responses to that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, like, you mentioned these three democracies, and like in the deliberative, kind of mentioned that they're trying to build kind of an identity on history or something. But I actually thought about like a future and maybe idea of something that is going to happen, like the sensory of something is going on or something coming. Like, is there a place of future that you can kind of describe these three democracies?
Yeah, first of all, there is a kind of historical evolution in those three democracies. They respond to each other. So 19th century representative, then 20th century deliberative, 21st century agonistic. So this, but I think not the three of them are good or bad. I think we need all three. Is what I said. So it is, and I think especially a representative democracy. So not deliberative democracy, because the representative democracy is really busy with the past, history, and future. Yeah? It has this literally this kind of mediating projection. It is still the arrow of I call it the timeline of modernity, which is part of this kind of democratic reasoning. And what happens starting from the 60s is growing of deliberative democracy. Of course, you can have very good, and I think it's very worthwhile, discussions and arguments about, but it's often related in or it is often restricted or placed in the here and now. It's what is going on now, what is urgent now. And it often loses a sense of history, but that means also that you lose a sense of future. So I think you need a play. I know it sounds a little bit abstract, but you need a play of those three to keep also a kind of historical consciousness, which is for me, again, there's a consciousness of the future also, because you can only have an idea of what a future, or at least a better future, will be if you have an idea what the past was, because otherwise you cannot relate. And again, a lot of debates, also political debates nowadays, are in the here and now, because they want to win the elections, of course, now, not in 10 years. So they have not a project for a long-term future. No, I missed the ball.
I feel like politics is something, like, is the kind of idea of something that is going to happen soon, like what we are going to do with our identity.
It can be. Politics is, for me, and I follow Jacques Rancière, philosopher, politics is giving form to society. That's politics. So politics is, and that can be having an idea, I think a better society would work like that. So as a politician, I take the responsibility to try to change it in that direction. But it can be also that I want to respond immediately on what is happening, and I react on that. So it does not need to have, certainly not a long-term future, and especially actual democratic politics, which works with voting every 4 years. I don't know a lot of politicians who think further than 4 years and use this also in arguments on television or whatever in the elections. So in the practice, this whole future idea is really becoming short-term. That does not mean that you can have a kind of utopic plan.
Thank you for your lecture. You described an art through the prism of post-Marxism. So, why did you choose democracy lens? Why you didn't choose totalitarian lens to see the art? Because we never have see real democracy. We have see real totalitarianism, theocracy, autocracy, and other.
First of all, I'm not a specialist in that, so I'm more a specialist, I say, in democracies and etc. But for me, most of the art and aesthetics before 19th century is related or to church, religion, or theocracy, or it is to the king. So that's art and politics. And is this dictatorship? This is something else than dictatorship, but anyway. So it is representing the power of politics. For me, this is very interesting to look at, but it is, let's say, it's not so interesting for me to study, because I know these mechanisms already. And for me, they are quite, how do you say it? I said a little bit blunt, but for me, they are quite lucid. I understand them. So for me, it's much more interesting to look at systems which say that they are democracies, and I agree with you. At least democracy is a verb. It's always going on. So you can democratize always more, and you are never living in democracy. That's the whole...
Like communism.
Like communism also. You never live in a kind of ideal, maybe communism, but it is an ongoing process which stopped at a certain moment, I think. But anyway, this yeah, for me, the mechanisms in a theocracy, in a dictatorship, are quite lucid. I think, if I'm right, it was somebody who, a Russian colleague of mine, made this analysis that the Minister of Culture was part of the Ministry of Defense in Russia, the last. So that says enough. That says enough. It literally says culture is part of nation-state politics and needs to represent the nation-state. So that's why and of course there are differences and complexities, etc. But yeah.
Another try to have a last question.
I want to say thank you for the lecture and for the statement that culture is a reservoir of science to articulate identities. And my question is, can it be the way to get more science to identify yourself than only language or only your sex or other only one science? And for example, I was thinking on the lecture that if we are talking only about language, then of course we cannibalize ourselves, because this cannibalization triggered me. I was like, oh my God, what he's saying, because I changed my language. I started to talk Ukrainian, and when I'm angry, I still talk Russian to my husband. But I'm trying to think about it as like it's a part of me, but I want to get more science of Ukrainian, not only language. I don't know, my look, my library, more books, more history books. Maybe that can be the way not to get in this shift again. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think it's very important, and for me this is also the whole part of creativity which comes in, is indeed to developing again and again new science, and I think this is also how you said, the main job artists need to do, is bringing always in this kind of, I call it a big bath, what is called culture with science, and to put new science in it again and again. And of course they can become at a certain moment maybe a good alternative in it. But I think, don't think it will happen in your lifetime. Because I'm afraid, and even when you look at more collective level, I see the effect of this kind of amputation coming back in societies after 75 years, after 100 years, as a kind of boomerang. It's something what is suppressed enormously, and then at a certain moment pops up quite violently. Again in this society, and this is I don't know if I can use this analysis for what is happening now at the moment in Israel and Palestine, but it has really to do with this also. It's really trying to put out a certain part of, in fact, your own culture, and then at a certain moment it's embraced, and that is, I think, the problem. So it really takes a long time. That's also why I stress not so much culture, but aesthesis, because this is really deeper. It's really in your. It's like you said. I like it very much. You said, when I'm angry, I start to talk Russian. When I'm angry on my husband, I start to talk Russian. That's literally. It's really in your sentiment, in your affects, in your sensitivity, and this is much more deeper than saying, oh, I just use another sign. That's a very, how do you say, mathematical way of solving the problem. It's a good one, we need to do that, but I think it's deeper.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.